Okay, the January 21st meeting of the Water Quality Management Committee will come to order. A quorum being present. First item on the agenda is a report from George Hoyfelder on two things. Particularly is the update on the layered soil absorption system that he has been studying at the test center. And I think you have a presentation on that, George?
Yes.
George is a former member of this committee who has been doing revolutionary work in this field.
Revolutionary.
Well, we're counting on it.
Use the microphone.
Okay, I'll start here then. Well, I've been asked to go over some research we've been doing on non-proprietary systems. These are systems that don't require a particularly proprietary product, such as you don't go in and buy it off the shelf and put it in your system. And in general, what we looked at are projects from across the country that were done in a manner which do not use proprietary products, and we're trying to figure out whether any of the research done in some large publicly funded projects had any relevance to our area and whether we could adapt them. So, had a lot of collaborators because I went through everybody's waste paper basket, went through all their old research. I called them on the phone, asked them where they were in different processes. And the top one there, Damon Anderson, he was one of the lead investigators in the Florida on-site denitrification project, which looked at non-proprietary means for septic systems. That was funded at about $5 million. George Loomis, as some of you may know, works in Rhode Island, does a lot of work with soils. Will Robertson, Dr. Robertson, University of Waterloo, back in the 90s published a paper that I dug back out, looked at some of the more recent findings, called him on the phone. Dr. Robertson is from University of Waterloo, actually was one of the first people who worked with sort of reactive barriers. And so he had some work on a horizontal barrier beneath a septic system. He published on, and then I went back and talked to him about his findings more recently. Dr. Layson, John Layson from state of Washington, Dave Potts, he has a product which we use to distribute wastewater to the top of a septic system in a pretty easy way. It's somewhat proprietary. And Dr. Jamieson, who was working with Nova Scotia on rewriting their wastewater regulations, he had a paper, a couple of his grad students published a paper, and I saw that there was nitrogen removal by configuring the system a certain way. So all these together, we threw them in the mix, talked to some people. I paid for the coffee and got together with a bunch of folks in Rhode Island with a whiteboard in front of us, and we came up with some designs that we might want to try. And basically, every one of these designs you see today are going to use wood products or lignocellulose. The first study done by Hayes and Sawyer in the Florida work actually looked at layering sawdust mix in under a standard leach field, collecting it and upflowing it through a denitrification media. And they got pretty impressive results. Following beneath there, they got 90% reduction of nitrogen just by a passive means. And by passive, I mean that there are no air pumps involved and that there's only one pump involved, usually to move the wastewater from one place to the other. And all of these have pressure dose systems. In this particular one, it's a drip system to the top of a leach field, has a layer down beneath it, a nitrification layer which turns all the ammonia to nitrate, and then there's some mix of soil and sawdust which achieves the denitrification. It looked pretty simple. In this particular design, they gather it all and put it through sulfur mix, upflow through sulfur. That's a complication you won't see that we duplicated up here. This is what it looks like. It's only stacked high because they didn't want to dig a hole. And we do the same thing at the test center. If you don't want to dig the hole, just raise it. because it's easier to see when it snows. It represents the worst possible case because it's colder than the ground normally is because you're above the ground grade. And this system here is the same one that he installed and got, again, 84% reduction and a very passive means. And what you have here is the ammonium to nitrate. This is the wood mix. He collects it under the ground, puts it through a sulfur upflow, and then comes back onto a disposal field. And if it looks complicated, that's because it sort of is. It's like a layer or a layer cake. And what we sought to do, based on my experience talking to Damon Anderson, and that wasn't over coffee, that was actually across the street here over a beer, was that this was still too expensive, a little bit more complicated than we thought it had to be. So we just tried to keep drilling down until we thought, how simple can we make it and still let it work? His design also, another design he had, pressure dose leach field, go down into a big bathtub down here with sawdust in it, actually wood chips in it. And I thought, well, that's simple enough, it's easy to construct. And we didn't have sufficient enough data when we started to try this design. Waterloo research, this held the most promise for simplicity to us. Because essentially this is, you look up there, a leach field, and beneath here, just a layer mixed with sawdust and a silty soil. And why the silty soil? You need to slow the water down to allow less oxygen transfer so that the carbon inside the ligno mix, which is sawdust mix, inside the sawdust mix can act as a carbon source and then go down, and your final disposal is right beneath the field. You're not collecting anything. Basically, this whole excavation from top to bottom is about 4 feet. And if you know anything about septic systems or seen them put in, you realize that that's a fairly shallow excavation compared to what is done even today. Because what we did on Cape Cod, can we talk? We did it wrong. We just dig down to the sand where it makes it go away, has less treatment. If we had used those surface layers, we might have got a lot better treatment. Basically, this system here is in a fairly shallow soil profile, 0 to 4 feet. So, what we did after we looked at all of those studies, we had to sort of say what is relevant to our setting here, both our geological setting, our economic setting, the ability of our contractor setting. And so we had to go through and validate each of the steps. Wastewater delivery, the nitrification, denitrification, and then the final disposal. For wastewater delivery, I said they used a drip system down in Florida. Well, a drip system adds about $7,000 to a normal system. So that to me was a non-starter as far as going forward with it. We chose to use a very shallow, narrow drain field configuration, which was pretty cheap. Sorry, I went too fast. So what we did was minimize it, and we're using a product that doesn't have a big profile. It only has about a 2-inch profile. It's easy to lay down. The last time George Botello saw it put out the base, he's dying to see it come into the state because he says that's the easiest thing since sliced bread to try to lay down a pressure dose leach field. We could use totally non-proprietary, that's also could be used. I just used a particular product at the test center simply because I wanted to eliminate my labor too, and I was the one laying down the leach field. The next step is nitrification. Now in Florida and all the places we looked at, they never had problem with the alkalinity. And nitrification is affected by how alkaline your water is as it passes through the soil. We have very acidic soil, so I thought, well, we better validate and verify that we can get nitrification inside a reasonable soil profile. So we used a siltier soil, not the sand you could find right out here in this front bed, we mixed it with a little bit of fine material, and we found out that within 18 inches, we could get total nitrification, that necessary first step, total nitrification inside of 18 inches of soil. So once we validated that step, the next thing, that's what it looks like, by the way, one of the fields. Once we did that, we had to make sure we had enough alkalinity during the nitrification step, which we verified, and that it would occur all winter long, because if you're standing outside right now, you know you're not in Florida. And then that the pH wouldn't drop so far below that it would stop the nitrification. So this was the second part of our experiment. Can we nitrify inside a shallow soil profile all year round? So we found that we could. Next step was to try the denitrification step. And basically, denitrification needs a carbon source, needs the nitrate, and needs conditions where there's no air. So we set up some experiments at the test center where we had soil columns where nitrified effluent was fed to the top of these soil columns to see whether we could mix sawdust and get nitrogen removal, total nitrogen removal. This is the last step. This is the money step right here. This is the one that normally costs all the money. We found that if you did it in a saturated condition, if you kept the sawdust that the nitrified effluent hit saturated, you could virtually eliminate 90% of the nitrogen in the sample. You see these graphs here? Those are 3 replicates of saturated conditions from those soil columns. So we knew, we said, okay, if it's saturated, we can achieve what we need to do. Unsaturated wasn't so good. Unsaturated would be easy because unsaturated, you don't have anything down there to hold the saturation. It's easier to construct. It's basically a standard septic system with some sawdust laid in underneath it. We found that that performance is not as good, at least in the soil columns. So the bottom line from all these experiments said sawdust or a lignocellulose carbon source for denitrification in our area is possible.
George, where's the water distribution in that top?
On this one?
Yeah.
Right here. It's in a low-pressure, time-dose, shallow drain leach field. And that material is easy to construct. Like I say, the jabroni like me puts in a field in about an hour and a half. Once it's level, once you get somebody who knows what they're doing level in the field, to actually make that, lay it out and pipe it, it's a piece of cake. Well, speaking of cake, that's what we call a layer cake. So from our experiments, we know that if we kept it saturated, we got it licked. But that's a little bit harder to configure in a standard system. It's more complicated. The contractor is going to take more time. It's going to be more expensive. But unsaturated, the easier way, didn't seem to work. But we wanted to take this then out to a full concept. And this is a way to think about it, really. Dispersal, nitrification, denitrification, and final disposal. So we created a small-scale leach field inside a tub so that we could totally sample everything that is in that, everything that passes through it. And all this is, if you were to construct this in the field, you go out, dig your hole down 4 feet, put the sand sawdust mix 50-50, put your loamy sand on top of it, put your your distribution network, and you're done. That's pretty much what it looks like, the small scale one. And this is the nitrogen from it. You can see that after that first spring, so far we've achieved levels down below 5. So these are the influence somewhere between 60 and 40. And the effluent is down below 5 for the most part after here. Now, what we don't know is how this is going to perform during the winter. Because there you're into December, but you know December this year wasn't really winter yet. But the interesting thing to note here is this is the simplest design. A contractor could do this in their sleep. There's only one thing they're going to have to do is mix half that pile they throw back in there with sawdust. That's all they're going to have to do. no matter what, it never dropped below 50% removal. 50% removal with the pressure dosage field, it got the removal.
You don't need that plastic tub.
No,
That
no,
was
the
just
tub
a-
was only so we could collect everything that passed through it.
Could you define total nitrogen in this case? Does it include the organic fraction?
Total nitrogen includes TKN, which is ammonia plus the organic fraction, and it's the nitrate and the nitrite. There was very little TKN left in this. And what you do see, those low numbers there, that's the organic fraction, which hasn't broken down yet. It's not nitrate.
And this is an unsaturated.
Unsaturated. So this was a small scale model. What we did, we said, now we're really gonna have to move that scale up. And I don't have those data because we just put it in, George Patella just put it in for us last month.
But, I mean, you do have winter, right, the first year?
Yes,
So you did, and that's when it was high. It
That's
wasn't
right.
working as well then.
that's right. So the first year, some of these, unfortunately, we can't time God. And we started some of these in the winter, like this one here. This is scaling up the saturated condition, creating a bathtub of sawdust sand mix beneath a standard leach field. We put this in last December. This is what it looked like going in. I mean, this is, by the way, the leach field. I mean, it's just, this is the fabric pipe shooting down the middle of it. And I only have that many laterals on here because we're playing. I mean, yeah, okay, I don't have a different life. We play with this stuff. But this would need half those number of laterals. We just put twice the numbers so I can back off and see how many do I really need. And you can't dig it up and, well, you could, it'd be a mess to dig it up and play the other way. So I can just shut off the ones one by one to see how many I really need. Because what's that translate to? Cost. We want to make this the easiest, cheapest, most economical, but still work way. So that's what the system looks like. That's what it looked like the first winter we did it. This is what it looked like the first summer. And again, it didn't have to be an amount. We just don't like digging deep holes. This is the nitrogen levels from that system. The final effluent after the first winter was completed have not risen above 5.
George, half the houses around here get heavy use in the summer and maybe zero use for several months in the winter. Would that affect the outcome?
I think in the summer is when it really works. In the winter is when, if we expect anything here, might be that these numbers might go up in the winter. Everything's temperature driven. I mean, the bugs are temperature driven. This is what this looked like last week. So if you say you don't want, or you don't want a good lawn, then don't have one of these. That was just last week. I couldn't believe it myself. I said, pretty soon I'm gonna have to get out the lawnmower in January to do this.
But you're not watering that either.
No, you'd never water it. You'd be crazy to water it, and if you were really torturing yourself, you'd fertilize it, but it can't get much greener than that. And no kidding, January 17th, that's like one for the books there. Okay, horizontal reactive barriers. We've all heard of the vertical barriers. Well, as I said, Dr. Robertson also experimented with a horizontal barrier directly beneath the system. All it is a place where the water has to stop a bit, less oxygen transfer, and a carbon source, sawdust. And so this is essentially what we constructed at the test center. 18 inches of loam, 18 inches of a silt base, and the rest sand. That would be like whatever's under your place. But we have a containment liner so we catch everything that passes through that system. It again has a distribution network over the top, looks like that. With the construction, this you may recognize as George Patella's crew also. They're mixing the different layers. This is marrying the native sand with a silt sawdust mix. When you put this thing in, you don't want to create just a sharp barrier. So you have about 2 inches that you marry the sawdust sand mix in. This is a silt sawdust mix down below, and then this is a nitrification layer that they're walking up on right now. so the loamy sand nitrification layer. This is a system pretty much near completion. The drain field, I put that down on a weekend and then piped it up. In essence, this is what it looks like. You have a nitrifying layer, you have your silt layer, and then your native soil down below. This took, George, it would take a good contractor, and it took a good contractor, 2 days to put in if you have some beanhead like me saying, slow down while I put in some sampling ports. So I'd say a leach field could go in a day. These are the data from those right now. We started this just in July of this year, and so far, all of the numbers have been below 10. You'll see three different lines there. What we're testing now is to see whether collecting the effluent under the entire system is equal to the numbers that we're getting from some pan lysimeters, because DEP is going to ask one question as we move forward to approvals with this. How do you sample it, and how valid are the samples you get? So we're doing a little work on, here's what the sampling port is, and here's how representative it is. So if these all track together as we go forward from here, in fact, we took some samples this week, and we take them every week now. Again, the numbers here are 45 to 60 in the influent, and they're down below 10 on the effluent, or the percolate. The bottom line is these full-scale experiments suggest that sawdust can be worked into the soil profile in a certain way in order to achieve a very economical way of removing nitrogen. They require a leach field, so a leach field will be sized a tad bigger than a standard leach field, but it does look like it's a pretty promising technique.
Would you have to replace the sawdust ever?
About 200 years is what
We can live with that.
What did you
Dr.
say?
Robertson said. However, he said if you went and talked about just 1/10 of it being available, 1/10 of what you put in there, then he says 20 years is a good number to use. Now, the one thing we don't know, there are some things we don't know about the simple unsaturated means. When you do it just simply unsaturated, just forget silt, don't use something real silty, use something, keep it sandy. What we're not sure we're doing is composting the wood also down below. Because when you have air, you have carbon, you can compost. If you compost, what does it make? Carbon dioxide and water. Well, that carbon dioxide is carbon you're sending out of the system. So we don't know how much is composting versus how much is being used for denitrification. And that's a big unknown, so there's a little work has to be done there. Saturated, we believe that Dr. Robertson's right on target. We've looked at enough saturated wood conditions denitrifying to realize that very little of that gets used up. I mean, if you did the stoichiometry, you'd say, holy mackerel, we got a century worth of carbon here for all the nitrate that will ever hit it.
So the cost between the saturated and the unsaturated difference, is it a big difference?
We don't know, because this is the funny part here is the silt system's waste product. It's two waste products. One, we got oak trees down like crazy, so they're sawing out plenty of sawdust. The other is a silt product that is used is really a waste product from the washing operations out at the pits, the sand pits. When they wash the stone after they crush it, they have this silty material left. So they don't know what to do with it. They use an infield mix for ball fields, but you only got so many ball fields out there. So we're not sure what the cost there would be yet. It's certainly very cheap if you're just mixing sand and sawdust, because you bring the two piles that have to go in there, one of them you mix 50-50 sawdust sand.
But you're saying the saturated right now is
If there's an
more
unknown there.
predictable, or,
There
I mean,
is
predictable in
saturated
terms of,
Nitrogen?
Nitrogen and-
Absolutely.
yeah.
There's no doubt in my mind that the saturated condition sawdust is dead on. You won't vary off. You won't go above 3 or 4. And so what we're working with now is creating the sawdust using a liner like we did, because we see that works. But now, once you create a bathtub for the stuff to go in, and you create a way for that drainage to get out, what do you do with the drainage when it comes out? You need a leach field for it. Well, you created this thing. So there's various ideas we've had, and we've been knocking them about with the crew that I just showed you the first couple of slides in. And we believe we could do it. It's just a matter of now, let's get a couple of these out in the field. And we've just applied for the SNEP grant, where we have wanted about 12 of these out in the field with monitoring for 2 years. The West Falmouth Harbor project, we might find some candidates there that will put these in under the conditions we would need to actually prove it. And the grant that we put together recently for the Southern New England
National
whatever it is,
Estuaries
SNEP,
Project.
the SNEP grant. I've also included quite a bit of sort of resource allocation towards somebody like George Loomis, who can write the design manual so the state can feel comfortable with the approval process. Because he's already done that for things like bottomless sand filters and pressure dose leach fields already, so they trust him. And the other person on that team is Damon Anderson, who did all the work in Florida, so.
George,
Sure.
if I might. I'm just wondering, I had a question about this, the sawdust sand mix.
Yes,
Is it more important as a carbon source, or more important as an anoxic zone for denitrification?
it's important for both.
It is, so that.
If you don't have one, you don't need the other, and if you don't have the other,
No.
you won't
Well-
need the one.
Well, you would need the anoxic zone, but the influence, the carbon to nitrogen ratio should be about right, or not.
Well,
right?
on the influent, no, because that burns up in the first 6 inches of passage. You could look 6 inches beneath most leach fields, and if you found more than 20 BOD, biochemical oxygen, man, I'd be surprised, because we do it all the time, and we don't see anything even close to it. So the carbon coming in fresh from the wastewater, that gets burned up pretty quick by the heterotrophs, the bacteria right in that first process, which is concurrently what's happening, is the nitrates being formed. Because it's got to take the ammonia coming out of our bodies, well, the protein that's breaking down to ammonia, has to convert that to nitrate first. It's the only way you get rid of nitrogen. Well, I should say, if you want to dump, sodium hydroxide on there, raise the pH, off-gas it as ammonia, but you'd have a hazardous waste to deal with afterwards. So the process is, it comes into a leach field. As it percolates down through, of course, the BOD burns right off, the carbon burns right off. The ammonia goes to nitrate. Now it's sitting down there in nitrate. It needs food, it needs carbon. Most denite systems that you buy in a box use fresh carbon coming from wastewater, feed it in down there. In fact, that's what Mr. McGrath used to do with one of his products. But this way, the wood serves as a slow-release carbon source to support denitrification. And it may, because it occupies some of the voids in the sand and the loamy sand, it may produce the conditions wet enough to keep it anoxic. So that's where we believe it's happening. If you saturate it, it's pretty easy. There's no oxygen getting into that water down in that sand bathtub. So we're still playing around with it. We've got close to, we've got 2 years worth of data on the small columns, but for full scale, we want to get at least 2 years worth of data before we really say, yep, it's definitely ready for prime time. We're in that, let's bring it out, let's roll it out and try a few more things with it. But when you look at it, just layering in under a septic leach field is the easiest, most economical way to do it. And if we can work out that, if we can hit that sweet spot, that's really game changer.
Okay, Matt?
How difficult do you think it will be to get approval from the state?
Well, again, I think that's going to depend on the credibility of those people working on it. And we've assembled a really good team. They don't have to listen to the local prophet here. I'm just the monkey that copied it all. So I think that there's enough credibility in the people who are working on this and the history with the state is that it's not going to be that big, difficult to leap. First thing, your nitrifying layers, really, it's a standard leach field. You're only saying, okay, I'm only going to use 18 inches instead of 3 feet of it or 4 feet of it. So what you're doing is modifying the soil with a foreign substance. That's how it's going to be viewed, a foreign substance. And they're going to want to know one of two things. It's going to reduce the transmissivity of it. In other words, it's going to clog the field. And if you're going to ask me for credit for it, how long will it last? So we got some homework to do, but I've involved Jose Amador, he's a PhD, soil scientist from URI, who's published a lot of things on denitrification. So there was a credible source there. George Loomis, as I said, has written most of the non-proprietary things we're using in the state right now, so he's obviously got some credibility there. So I'm hoping that this will advance because as far as its need, it's out there. We're never going to see the entire Cape Seward, I hope. We're not probably going to see even above 50%, and I don't think even that's a hefty percentage. And southeastern New England, there's a lot of places through Rhode Island and the rural communities that feed into our estuaries are going to need a simple solution. And if this is it, it'd be great.
Any other comments or questions from
Fantastic.
members of the committee?
It's tremendous.
Well, yes, I have to say, this is as exciting as things get in the wastewater field.
Wow, I thought I was the only one that got excited about the wastewater.
In fact, we have this award.
Any comments
It's
or
a
questions
large
from the
crowd.
public? Mr. Finneran,
Yes.
could you come to the microphone, please? Or could we get him a microphone?
Why don't you use this one?
Yeah, good.
Yeah, I was just wondering if there was a problem with the duration of this. Could you increase it by adding wood chips or even chunks of wood that conceivably would take longer to break down?
Yeah, it's a good question. When you look at the silt barrier work that was done, when you asked Dr. Robertson, he had 10% sawdust mix, and he said 200 years. So when we did our experiments, we had to do it with 20% sawdust. I don't know whether that gets me 400 years, but I know what it did get me. When I asked Mr. Patello to mix it 10%, he said, I'll do that, but I can't see it. You know, you can't, so when you're tossing it around, you can't see it. I said, well, if you can't see it, tell me what you can see, and about 20% he could. So I believe you could increase the carbon to a point, and then what that point is, we don't know. But intuitively, the more carbon, the more capacity.
Hilda, could you find a microphone?
Yeah, you guys could
There.
just come up here. I don't have anything that moves.
You mentioned the winter conditions, but I still don't quite get it if it freezes deeply and the whole system is frozen.
Well, we've never seen the system freeze completely. And that was the step that we thought would be the most limiting, the top layer, the nitrification, because that's the more sensitive to temperature. But that first slide I showed you, that green field's been in 6 years. And we had a fairly cold winter last winter. This winter hasn't been. But even drip systems we've had during record cold years, and I've never seen one freeze. You just design them so they drain properly, and you've got it licked. What we're concerned about is the soil temperatures. Not so much freezing. By the way, frozen soil still allows water to pass through it. But I've just personally never seen in all the years a frozen system. I just haven't seen one. It was designed properly. We did one on purpose to see, and it froze, but
Any
not
other
one that's designed properly.
Comments or questions from the public or from the committee?
I just had one, I mean, with the existing leach fields that we have now, they clog up,
Yes.
right? And anyway, I mean, they just, over time, whatever many years, it would seem therefore that this might clog sooner or a little bit faster than a regular because of the organic matter you're putting in the ground, or?
Well, you'd have to know why people's systems clog up.
Okay.
if a system is fed properly, is treated properly, there's really no reason that it would ever clog up.
Okay.
But people overload them hydraulically or organically, and that's what happens. There's no reason to believe, because remember, this layer is down deep. The second layer is down below 18 inches down below. And we have not seen the growth occlude or slow down the perk rate of that soil as it goes through it in the short time we're doing. But there's no reason to believe it would be any worse than the system above it. And the system above it is totally regulated by how somebody treats their system.
Okay. Pat?
Still have the eco-toilet stuff. Real quick summary.
Are you on that subject? You on this?
Well, this is sort of tangentially, with the urine from the urine diverting toilets, could you just put that on top of that system?
You could do anything you want. Whether it would be legal or good, that's another thing. But if you saw that lawn, which you did, would you want it any greener than it is? No.
Well, I mean, not to make the grass green, but just to eliminate.
Dispose of it?
Dispose of it.
It wouldn't be legal, it wouldn't be proper, but.
It wouldn't be legal and it wouldn't be proper.
Correct.
Well, there's your answer.
But would it do the job?
Do the job. Would it take the nitrogen out of the urine?
Yeah.
There's always been this question of, one, whether you'd want to do that, particularly as a process. But the second part is, I suspect that whatever you nitrified on top of that system, so you'd have to spread it a little thin because, you don't just want to hydraulically overload it. Whatever you fed that system down below in nitrate, if it was saturated, you will get rid of that nitrate. It's all about residence time. So you don't want to dump it all in one spot. So, move around when you go out there, Matt, move around. Just kidding.
Now, but
Just kidding.
you have the right to remain silent.
Yes.
Now, moving on,
Okay.
we asked George to come for this, but we thought as long as he was here, if he could give us a couple of minutes update on the work he's been doing on the eco toilet study,
Right.
which is, as you know, the town has a contract with George's outfit to monitor the eco toilet people that have been participating in our eco toilet experiment. So,
Okay, not as prepared for this one, but total of 11 properties participating. 3 properties have urine diverting toilets. Some had some pre-installed samples. There's a few difficulties with the pre-installed samples, but generally we got them. 12 to 13 post-install samples taken at each property. 6 properties had composting toilets, only 1 with no pre-installed sample. 2 properties with 17 post samples, so we get a good idea what's going on. 2 are hybrid or combination technologies, and that would be some that had a composting toilet, and 1 had a toilet that wasn't used much in the house, but the urine from that toilet went into a composting toilet, and 1 is still being sampled with 8 samples taken. The results, these are really generalized results. We can pretty much say, and I start saying now fairly publicly, that for composting toilets, you get about a 90% removal of the total nitrogen load. And that's considering concentration times the volume, because there's a reduced volume. If you just looked at the concentration, you would not say that, because many of these come in at like 10 milligrams per liter or even higher total nitrogen. But when you back up and you look at the water use for the property, they generally have about a 90% removal if it's a composting toilet totally. A hybrid is just about the same, because it was true that the toilet that they said wasn't used much and the urine went into the composting toilet. It was a true situation, because we know that there wasn't much poop in that septic tank because we were sampling it, and we would see it. Mainly gray water into the system. For the urine diverting toilets, and I want to make a distinction here, because there was a recent publication of urine diverting for purpose of recovery of nutrients, and that's the stuff they're doing up in Vermont. some very good, and I believe groundbreaking work shows that, there's a good possibility for nutrient, recovery there from urine, and it's a good program, and I'd urge you to sort of read some of that. But for the purpose of reducing nitrogen, total nitrogen, it's really all over the board. We get some real high counts, some low, but it's so variable that I do not believe that it would ever be accepted by DEP as a nutrient reduction strategy. Now, again, composting toilet, if you think about it, you've got everything captured. The audience is captured. They don't have a choice. Everything's going down in that hole. Or in some cases in the backyard, but we won't mention any names. But for the most part, a composting toilet, that's it. It all goes into one place, and then you've really packaged it to the point where the next question is, how much does it cost to manage that package? Will you recover some nutrients to offset some of those costs? Those are questions a little bit beyond what we're looking into. But certainly composting toilets give you a pretty decent removal, 90 to 92% removal of total nitrogen from the wastewater stream. Remember, how we determined that is we measured the remaining concentration in the gray water, which typically was somewhere around 9 to 10 milligrams per liter, but the volumes were reduced so much that the total load reduction comes down to that. The
George,
urine
can I-
diverting, yes.
Just on the composting, does that include the leachate?
Oh, no, that's just, the leachate usually goes into the system, and then about, I think 70%, although I may be off on the percentage, of that in the leachate then needs to be managed.
Yep.
You have to take that away, and that could be, depending on the house.
A couple of gallons per person per month.
Yes. It all depends on what opportunity that has to evaporate.
Right.
I've seen some systems, and I've just looked at one recently where they've been in there about a year, and we've only taken, this is not in Falmouth, and we've only taken 5 gallons of liquid waste out of that system. And they don't report having any liquid remaining in that system, but they go long periods of time where they don't use the system, and it's recirculated back up on the compost, so I suspect a lot more evaporation goes on. And a constant use, we've seen up to, I would estimate up to 200 gallons a year per home. So those are sort of broad results we're working on. I have a staff member working on some of the actual load reductions for each individual of the 11 homes that we're monitoring and seeing what's going on.
Okay. Thank you.
So that's a very brief and broad update.
Right.
Yes, Matt?
Question?
Did you get that spike looks like mine?
Yeah, that
And
could be.
did she get the most recent information that I gave her that might account for that?
I sent it to her, but it may not be reflected in this graph. But even
Okay.
that, even if you took out that large spike there,
There's 2 additional people moved
yeah,
into that.
you've got some fairly high numbers compared to, like, these numbers represent like less than 10. And these, as you can see, represent less than 10. It's not close to the urine diverting. When you think about it, I mean, and if you have a urine diverting toilet and you have the choice one way or another, a lot depends on the user there. And it's like the voting booth. Once you shut that door, you're voting one way or the other, and nobody's going to know except the guy sticking his hand down there doing the monitoring.
Okay, we don't need to go any further on that issue. We've got a couple of time constraints here, so
Yep.
I know there are at least 2 people in this audience who are very interested in the details of this, and I'd say you'd be welcome to meet with them outside of this while we move on to the rest of the agenda.
Okay, that's fine, thank you.
Thank you, George.
Thank you, George.
Thank you,
That
George.
was very
Have a
nice.
good meeting if I can.
Are you going to have that report
Well, we
available?
haven't drafted it, but we're still crunching the numbers on these.
Okay, and the previous thing, too.
Okay, next item, Mr. Smolowitz from the, no, we're going to.
Reverse the order.
Yeah, I think
That makes
with the permission of the committee, we'd like to reverse the order here. I told Ron to come at 4. I have to leave at 4:45, or my dog will spend the night at the vet's.
I'll talk real fast.
Not
So-
too fast, I gotta take notes. Do you have a presentation to load?
I'm not going to show a PowerPoint or anything.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, we did send around to all the members.
The letter of
The
intent?
material you sent me, your previous report from last year, the letter of intent, and the letter back from the Economic Development.
Lovely.
So everyone did receive an email with those elements in it.
Okay. So I'm Ron Smolowitz. I'm on the Board of Directors at Conemeset Farm Foundation, which is our research and educational organization. I have with me Shay Miller, who's our coastal ecologist that would probably be heading up this project. What basically talking about is we submitted a letter of intent to the Cape Cod Economic Development Council to continue some work that we started with them in 2014, which is that first section of the report, which is entitled Formulating a More Effective Management System for Shellfish Production and Nitrogen Remediation. In a nutshell, what we have is coastal aquaculture grants for shellfish are about the lowest rung on the ladder for estuarine usage. You have to demonstrate to get a shellfish grant, and that's a physical location, which is the only way the current system works, that there's no shellfish there, no seagrass there, there's no real competing users. And that was fine when it was a for-profit enterprise. In Massachusetts especially, hunting, fishing has a priority over that type of activity. But now the world is changing. We're finding that shellfish can be a useful tool for nitrogen remediation. So growing shellfish now is multi-purpose. It has a public role. And so what we were looking for is a new system, a public-private partnership to maximize the benefits of growing shellfish, not just from a food production standpoint, but from a nitrogen remediation standpoint. And we've been working on that since 2009, actually. And a lot of the issues are regulatory, and that's why our focus, with the help of a legal intern from UMass Dartmouth School of Law and their professors, we did a fact-finding stage, which looking at all the coastal states and what systems are in place for shellfish aquaculture. What we want to do now is, based on that, is to go to the next step, which is to work with towns on Cape Cod to implement the concept. And the concept is pretty simple. It says you could be a grower, a shellfish grower, but not have to be attached to a fixed site. And the way this would work is the municipalities have a lot of capabilities of setting up aquaculture zones and doing a lot towards fostering shellfish. And in partnership with private contractors, which would basically be either growers or diggers, fishermen that have their Massachusetts shellfish and seaworm license, be able to grow shellfish without being attached to a fixed site. One example potentially is that you could take a pond, Bourne Pond, and you could, and I'll just use the U, let's call it the public-private partnership, because a lot depends on who you assign to do what. You could seed an area at the bottom with clams in year 1, and then grow oysters above that bottom in floating cages that are modified for additional nitrogen remediation, for example, containing biocord. And in year 2, you could shift those cages to another part of the pond and open up that clam bed for commercial and recreational harvest. So it provides a lot more flexibility. So what we want to do is work with towns like Falmouth to try to set up this type of system. And it might differ in each estuary, it might differ in each town, depending on a whole host of factors. So we're just coming here for support and guidance. It would be great if the town of Falmouth had its old Shellfish Advisory Committee, because we could work through that tool. But maybe that's what we need to do. Maybe this committee needs to consider that and approach the selectmen about setting up a Shellfish Advisory Committee to work on some new concepts. I know we've been talking about an aquaculture plan for a million years, but having a committee which has this various stakeholders, we have the diggers, we have the growers, we have the recreational folks, but now we also have people interested in nitrogen remediation and Concom and others to develop a system that would be able to maximize our potential to grow shellfish in these estuaries. So we submitted our letter of intent, it was accepted, and one of the questions they had is to be more specific on the interests of being shown by the various towns. So that's the question here is basically, do you think this is a good idea, and will you help support us in working together and trying to come up with some alternative strategies for growing shellfish?
Comments, questions from the committee? Matt?
We certainly have been talking about encouraging private shellfish areas, and this would be consistent with that. We know, well, we want to learn as much as we can about it. So I would argue that it's, yeah, I would support it.
So as part of your study, or maybe somebody else is looking at this, have you considered the economic aspect, in particular, at what point we might reach sort of market saturation with respect to growing oysters and clams in some of these estuaries? And
Yeah, I'm a shellfish grower, and the general opinion up and down the East Coast is we're nowhere near market saturation, and for a host of reasons. So, but that is something that needs to be considered in the long haul, but probably not at this level. This is basically to figure out the management system that you would be putting into place. The economics is something that needs to be discussed in developing this, because there's lots of complications. Who should own the gear? How do you set up an agreement between the municipality and the contractors? How do you share in the profits? There's many models for doing that. So that's all a part of the economic picture as well. The idea is to be able to make it a for-profit enterprise, so it doesn't cost the municipality anything to produce the shellfish.
Well, we're getting into the big picture here. The immediate request, as I understand it, is for some indication of support for your application to the Cape Cod Economic Development Commission. First thing that crosses my mind is, are there any town or committee applications currently before that group that we might be competing with ourselves on?
The town has one, and it's actually called, and when Greg Frazier brought it before you I think 2 months ago, budget neutral shellfish aquaculture, and that's the project in Bourne's Pond that the Division of Marine Environmental Services has also been asked to do a full proposal on. So there is that proposal, again, looking at how to do budget neutral shellfish aquaculture from the town.
Okay. Steve?
Have you approached the Department of Natural Resources?
Right.
They seem more aligned with what you want.
But they don't, To be quite frank, it's a public-private partnership is in conflict with the system that just uses municipal employees and contractors. And so they did not have interest in working with us. And that's really bothersome, to tell you the truth, that not getting involved with all the stakeholders. So we've been doing this now for quite a few years and been getting tremendous involvement. We have support from, in the last one, Conservation Law Foundation, elected representatives, shellfish growing organizations, commercial fishing organizations. We have broad-based support and a broad-based involvement. I approached both Greg and Chuck, and they just said that we can't commit to being involved in a project. Basically, they were saying the selectmen would have to tell them to do this. So this, to me, is my first step coming to the committee. But I think it would be personally a little outrageous to say you wouldn't support a project because you have a competing project in.
No offense, I don't think that's outrageous at all. Have you approached any other towns?
We've had some preliminary discussions with other communities for support on this particular project.
Any particular towns you'd like to name?
So we've reached out to Wellfleet and trying to get in touch with some people in Barnstable and see if they
And where? Sorry, Wellfleet and
Barnstable.
Barnstable.
Okay, and when do you need to know? Presumably the application's due February 8th, so you need some kind of response from all these places by February 4th, is that fair?
We would need, a response from a number of places to show that there's interest in it.
Okay.
I'd make a motion that we write a letter of support.
Do I hear a second?
I would second it. But I'm-
You being a principal partner
I
in
know,
the
principal
project.
partner, it's hard to do that. I would do it otherwise. Otherwise, I can't have to abstain.
Can I get a motion to take it under advisement? We have a meeting on the 4th. We can do something with this between now and then. I can't get a motion for anything today.
Could I ask a question for clarification? If there were not a public-private partnership, the additional areas that would be seeded with quahogs or oysters that have been grown would be available for public harvest, correct?
I don't understand the question.
If we did the planting that you've suggested, but kept it just done by the town, the shellfish that grew would be available for public harvest?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's, your proposal brings in an economic factor of trying to generate money. But they could just be open as family shellfish areas.
No, the advantage of this proposal is to grow shellfish in floating cages because you would have a much higher level of nitrogen remediation than just seeding clams on the bottom. And that the cages can be decided. You would.
The debate today is
Okay.
not over the big picture of how a partnership might work. It's over the very specific one of, does this committee want to send a letter in support of a particular application when apparently there's another town agency that's submitting an application to the same entity on the same subject matter?
Well, you made a suggestion that we discuss it on the 4th and have a vote then. Well, I'll make that motion, if that's what you're looking for.
Can we get a second for that one? Sure. Okay. Further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Abstain.
Thank you. Okay, we can explore this between now and the 4th. Yeah.
Short question. I have one small question.
Can we get him a microphone here?
You can go up to the microphone.
Now, many of us have seen pictures of the 3-year control group of the oysters from Little Pond, and they achieved up to, I don't know, they appeared to be like 20 inches in diameter. And of course, I was told that there's no marketable use for those things, but obviously, if you're growing something in 3 years that grows up to 20 inches, it's doing a fair amount of nitrogen removal. Is anybody ever considered something like maybe Cape Cod cat food? Because it just seems to me that if the potential's there to grow these things as large as they are, I mean, it would be beneficial to just toss them out in the ocean, but I mean,
We'll sell you all the 20-inch oysters we have if you can make cat food out of them.
well, it seemed that if you could get them to grow to that size, I mean, it has a positive effect. And
Interestingly, they're not 20 inches. They're not 20 inches.
His forearm is
Well,
longer
he
than a
was,
brook, you
he
know,
was
I mean,
joking. They were about 4 inches to 5 inches
Right.
long, and actually, they were very popular, and they were harvested. There were a couple that were
I saw
about
pictures
6
of
or
ones that went from his wrist
Yeah, there was
to
one or
his
two of
forearm.
those. The rest of them were in the 4, 5, 6 inches, and they were actually.
Right.
Anyway.
I think between now and the 4th, we can learn a little bit more about what the town side is up to and what we could do to be helpful to the issue in general. Okay, thank you. Next piece here is the Falmouth Harbor.
Really quick. When are you leaving?
15 minutes, 13 minutes. As many of you know, the committee has been looking at each of the town's 15 estuaries, one at a time, and focusing on what in our toolbox would be appropriate to address the nitrogen problems in that particular estuary. One thing we're finding is that every estuary is very different from every other one, both in where the nitrogen comes from, how much there is, and what the options are for reducing it. So today's is Falmouth Harbor Day.
I do need a mic, thank you. I think I can. I was thinking you guys could pick me up from that, but
We've been through this a number of times before, and those of you who followed us will understand what we're doing, but carry on.
Okay. What we're doing is looking at the Massachusetts Estuaries Project reports that have been published starting in 2004, 2005, and we've gotten some recent ones in 2012, and we're taking a look at what those, sort of a synthesis of all those reports. We've been down the west coast of Falmouth, turned the corner, and now we're at Falmouth Harbor. And for those of you who don't know, Falmouth Harbor is near town. This is Main Street, Route 28. This is Scranton Avenue. There's a couple of landmarks. This is the Queen Street, King Street neighborhood. I think that's a really good landmark. And this would be where the Scranton Avenue meets the the police station and the rec center. So just to give everybody a sense of the geography of the area. This is where Falmouth Harbor has been monitored as part of that Massachusetts Estuaries report. They have a sampling station here at the head, here at the source, here where a lot of the boating and the marinas are, and then the Sentinel station is about 2/3 of the way up, a little bit north of, or a little bit south of the boat landing, which is right about there. One of the things I want to say about the Estuaries report, it's a very thorough analysis of water quality, and so 4 sampling stations in Falmouth Harbor gives you a pretty good look. This is the watershed, and for those of us who have been doing this for a while, we understand that while this is the harbor, the area that actually contributes to it is significantly larger. This is that Queen Street, King Street neighborhood, and the nitrogen from there, from the septic systems, from the stormwater runoff, all goes into Falmouth Harbor. It goes up to Morse Pond, and there's the Morse Pond School. And then a section of the upper watershed is Saul's Pond, and I think this is called Jones Pond, right? I forget.
Yes.
That's Jones Pond. So a fraction, and of course the nitrogen goes into the ponds, is attenuated approximately 50%, and then finds its way into Falmouth Harbor. And these are the sub-watershed delineations in the report. This is a screenshot from Watershed MVP, which is the 208 Cape Cod Commission's 208 planning tool, and it shows relative water use. So you can see a number of single-family homes, and water and nitrogen are sort of analogous to each other. We've got commercial development that has higher water use. We've got the boatyard using a lot of water, probably wash boats. And here, so this kind of gives us a pictorial representation of those individual sources of nitrogen. And this is my favorite chart in all of these MEP reports, because from it, we can get some very good planning numbers. They're definitely planning level estimates. They're based on the modeling that's done as part of this Massachusetts Estuaries report. But what it shows us for Falmouth Harbor is if you take the present watershed load that's derived from land use as well as water quality monitoring, and you subtract the threshold, which is what the model would like the concentration of nitrogen to be for estuarine health, and you subtract the two, and you multiply by 365. So if you take the 7.1 kilograms a day, multiply it by the 5. Subtract the 5.4, you get about 1.7 or 2 kilograms a day. Multiply it by 365 days in the year, and you get an annual load that you'd like to have removed from Falmouth Harbor to begin to restore it to health. So 625 kilograms a year. The next thing we want to look at is, so where is that 625 kilograms a year coming from? And as is true with just about every other estuary we've looked at, the dominant source is of nitrogen are septic systems. The 69% of the overall load is septic, and then it's 77% when you just look at the controllable load, which in the report is defined as not atmospheric deposition, because we really can't control atmospheric deposition on a local level, and it doesn't include natural surfaces, but although it does in this one. But in general, the controllable load is septic system, fertilizer, and stormwater. Those are considered the controllable loads. Now, in this particular graph, we see something very interesting, which is 7% of the controllable load is from a golf course. So I looked at that, and we know that there's been a development. This was the Atria Woodbriar golf course, but it is not there anymore. So the Atria Woodbriar is now the senior assisted living facility. They don't have a golf course there, but when this report was written, it was there, and they counted all the nitrogen that the golf course would have contributed. So clearly, this is, we have a dynamic community with a static report, and you start to see things like this, so that when we would go into it for a finer level plan, we would, of course, want to adjust for that. But really, we need to address the septic load. And this chart is also in every MEP report. It tells you by the numbers how many kilograms are coming from each source and how much the attenuation is. Just as I'm giving everybody a quick overview because I know we're under time constraint.
Actually, you're not. I have to leave, but you can keep right on going. You don't need me for.
Right. I'll
We have a very
Oh, okay.
very
I
capable
didn't mean to be
vice
rushing through it. I just was trying to respect our time. So I'll take one more minute on this. Yep.
How does it get there from the wastewater treatment facility? Or are you coming to that later?
I was going to talk about that later, but
Okay.
I can talk about it now.
Seems amazing.
Well, and we've seen this too with the little pond.
We think it's an error.
And we don't agree with it. And I wasn't going to sort of belabor this chart. When we would go in and do our next level of analysis for Falmouth Harbor, would want to address a couple of things. We want to address the fact that there is not a golf course load. And we'd want to adjust for the wastewater load, which in this case and in the case of Little Pond, we do not think is an accurate representation of where that's going. But they're still de minimis compared to the real culprits in terms of nitrogen loading, which is on-site wastewater and impervious surfaces, but mostly it's the wastewater. But also the non-golf course. If you look at the non-golf course fertilizer versus the golf course, clearly our fertilizer bylaw is more important than not having a golf course anymore. So those are where the loads come from, and what we...
Some of the golf course nitrogen, okay, it's now a natural surface. Right, so some of that would
It
probably
might.
be shifted to the other, because the area is still there, so it's still.
You're still gonna have to treat a bunch of on-site wastewater.
Yeah, right, no, I'm just saying that.
Uh-huh.
It doesn't completely disappear.
And so what
The
we've,
place that replaced the golf course has a very high-tech nitrogen removal system that's been mandated, so.
that's right, and I was in the offices of the company that manages that system, and they're below 5 milligrams per liter. They have,
No, I just mean the open area that's left over. That's what
Yeah,
I'm saying,
yep.
not the developed area.
yeah, they put grass and stuff in.
That's true. It's a park.
Yep. So what we have is 625 kilograms. And what we like to do is look at different options for reducing that mass of nitrogen. And we have a fertilizer bylaw. By the 208 plan, we get a 25% credit of the total fertilizer input, which amounts to about 56 kilograms of nitrogen. I want to talk a little bit about, I want to show you some pictures of the stormwater, because there's some real places to look at stormwater. The other options for this watershed are, again, permeable reactive barriers, innovative alternative septic systems and eco-toilets, and shellfish aquaculture. And so I'm going to talk about those briefly. This is the 24-inch storm drain right below the harbor master's office. When we were asked, there was a solicitation from the EPA on stormwater best management practices, and we had applied for that. We were not selected. This was one of the premier sites that we were looking at. This direct discharge is the upper watershed of all of Queen Street and King Street. So the catchment area for this is about 3 acres, and it's the entire neighborhood that I showed you at the beginning of the presentation. So it's quite a large area. And there's a park above it, but what I want you to note is the depth. That pipe is very low. So the reason that the EPA didn't want to look at it for their demonstration is we would have to pump the water from the pipes that are about 10, 12 feet underground and bring them up into a rain garden or some other system. And they didn't want to get into that for a first level demonstration project, but we're very aware that this is a project where additional stormwater management, I can send you the picture if you want. Yeah. All right. But this is a significant catchment area, and there's a park nearby, so there may be an opportunity to actually do an infrastructure improvement that would capture a significant amount of the stormwater going into this actual water body.
Steve?
Do you know the pitch of that pipe? It's possible that it's up high for most of its length and then comes down.
So we did look at that with the DPW, and their estimation is that it's not pitched down. It actually is from the neighborhood. It pitches to when it gets to the park, or when it gets to that storm drain, and at that storm drain, it's like 10 feet down. That was their expectation. So pumping was going to be, at the level that we did the analysis, and we had 2 people from the EPA on site, and Jerry was there, and the stormwater engineer for the town of Falmouth was there, and they all agreed at that point that we were going to need to pump to get into a rain garden or some treatment best management practice for the stormwater. Stormwater is very important for a place like Falmouth Harbor because of the turbidity and because of the other things besides just nitrogen. So it's something definitely to keep in the forefront of our planning minds. We've talked about having neighborhood meetings and reviewing watersheds for common themes, but I want to take the next slide and show you some potential PRB areas. This is Scranton Ave, and if a PRB came across Main Street, down part of Scranton Ave, and then across Queen Street, it would capture this nitrogen load. And again, we need to verify this based on groundwater wells. I mean, I'm not going to do a PRB update here, but if you calculate the nitrogen coming from this part of the watershed, it's 760 kilograms. And that doesn't include the surface runoff, Ron, exactly what you were talking about. All of that is also captured by a PRB. So it goes into the ground and the PRB captures it. That would also be captured by it. Another potential configuration is, depending on which way the groundwater flows, using Scranton Ave as the PRB siting location. And if the flow is perpendicular, then you would be capturing that entire neighborhood and a lot of the stormwater as well. So those were just some thoughts about PRBs, and I think I'm going to leave it there. and go back to our alternatives where we tend to land and like to take a few minutes to discuss what other options might be available.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to open it up to the committee
Oh, okay.
and have your thoughts on these different options.
The obvious one to consider crossing off is where do you grow shellfish in Falmouth Inner Harbor?
Well, we do grow shellfish in Falmouth Inner Harbor right now. You know where Deacon's Ave is?
Yes.
Okay, Deacon's Ave is, we propagate actually quahogs there, and we've grown out quahogs there for years.
Do you have sufficient area to make a significant change?
So 600 kilograms, call it 2, 3, 4 acres, somewhere in there. Could you do it? I think shellfish could be and ought to be part of the solution for Falmouth Harbor as well, because 625 kilograms is a manageable number for shellfish. And there is it's a busy, obviously it's Falmouth Harbor, there's my moorings in Falmouth Harbor. There's a lot of boats in Falmouth Harbor, but that area along Deacon's Ave, depending on the density, depending on how you did it, you might be able to get 500,000 shellfish. Maybe more. Haven't done a full analysis of the shellfish in Falmouth.
We have also a big mixer that goes up and down, so.
Yes, we do.
turn the water
Very
around.
well aerated. The Island
Island
Queen
Queen
is
does
an
a good
excellent
job.
aerator.
I mean, haven't we, since the reports were done, things like Morse Pond School have been put on the sewer?
Yes.
So there's some big sources in that watershed, which we've already sewered. Stop and Shop, for instance,
Yes.
is sewered. And then on the east side of the harbor, a lot of that is being sewered as part of the Little Pond project.
That's correct. Yeah.
So we should recalculate how much has already been taken out with sewer projects.
I think that's an excellent finding. I think that's exactly what we would do next, is do a recalibration of the sources.
Right. Okay. Matt?
I think with George's recent findings about the IA systems, you can't just discount those, even if it takes a year or two to get them approved. That's a tremendous
Right.
alternative to use.
Well, if you
And
remember.
inexpensive as well. The thing we'll have to contend with is if we want to provide betterments, just like eco toilets, how are we going to do that?
Yes, yeah, there are clearly some administrative questions that are.
Virginia, can I ask, George, what's the distance to groundwater in that whole Queens Street area? Isn't that an area where you hit groundwater in a big hurry?
High groundwater now, okay.
So that limits what you can do with on-site systems.
See, what fraction of the load that you need to remove is coming through that pipe to Harbor Master Zone? Just approximately.
I don't know.
It was less, it was a small amount,
It's small.
yeah.
I would say that, see the impervious, it's 300 kilograms,
299?
299?
Right.
And I would say, based on, probably half of that is coming from that pipe. The other half is coming from Robbins Road and another pipe that, I didn't know this, and if Eric Turkington were here, he would say that the reason Davis Straits is called Davis Straits is because it used to be a strait. And so it all used to be water, and now it's all underground.
Yeah,
So
connects a pond. There's a herring run up
that's
there.
right, there is a herring
The
run.
north end of that pipe.
That is the north end of that pipe, thank you.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. So there's another pipe that does come down, that's a storm drain pipe as well.
The Morse Pond culvert.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right under the hotel and everything.
Right into the hotel at Robbins Road. So those two storm drains are those two impervious surfaces. And so, given,
It's relatively small.
but if you're only trying to remove 625 kilograms, you get 100. That's not an insignificant piece. And the other thing about stormwater that a lot of people forget is that there's particulates and road, volatile, the organics that are on the road and metals and all the gunk off the street it's going into a water body. So it's good, if you've got these two big sources, it's good to address.
What I was thinking, you rejected that pipe for a rain garden because of the pumping.
EPA did.
EPA.
We
Okay,
did.
okay.
EPA did.
But in principle, you could dig a big hole near the output end of it and put in one of George's magic layered things in the form of a giant tank, some sort of filter.
An underground filter,
Totally
yes.
defer to George
Yeah.
to design.
Yes, absolutely.
Hilda, would you like to make a comment?
Well, she's coming up, but I'd just like to say, echo what Sia said about the toxicity of road runoff. It literally kills fish. It's been
Yes.
proven to do that.
Yes.
Hilda.
I want to add to that. My son works with the stormwater in New York City, which is a huge problem. And most of the pollutants come from the very first flush. We do not have to clean or get rid of all the water. We have to get rid of the very first little bit of rain, which has almost all the pollutants. So he's working on street by street to install, and he's getting the first prototype hopefully in the next few years, of treating street by street with a street creek. And you can start looking it up and see what it looks like. But it's something that we should start looking into, and it only takes the pollutants and the water from the very first flush.
And it's something that's installed in the storm drain?
On the street,
Oh,
yeah.
it's installed on the street?
Yeah.
Huh.
So
Okay.
just so people realize that it's a lot of water we have to deal with, but we only have to deal with the very first flush. That has all the pollutants, minerals, nitrogen, whatever, junk.
Well, if you have a product name, if you could.
Well, he's developing it now, he's getting the first grants to start putting it in a virgin neighborhood.
Please keep us
Street
informed.
creeks.
Street
Creek.
quick.
Street
Creek.
Street
Creek.
Creek.
Street
He
creek.
named it Street Creek, yeah.
There we go.
He developed.
Cute. Okay, thank
That's
you.
right, that's why the most dangerous time for driving is at the beginning of
Right.
the rainstorm.
Right.
When you have the water and the oil.
Right. Mark, just grab a microphone there.
Where's go up to podium?
I had 2 points, but Steve mentioned the first one relative to the runoff and by the harbor master's office. And then with what Hilda brought up, and everybody knows that it's the first 5 minutes of a storm that the roads are most slippery because it pulls all the stuff up and flushes it away. Is there a possible, maybe George, you could put some kind of a sump in it that would collect that first part and then feed it off and treat it slowly? And then secondly, couldn't you adapt these cages for the growing of the shellfish to fit under all those docks that we have that are movable in some fashion?
I'll defer.
Just an
to-
idea.
Thank you.
That's a neat idea, actually. The idea
We own them
that,
anyway, right?
well, yeah, the idea that you do, it's a question of density. Gear, and when you can bottom plant the shellfish, you can get $500,000 to $1 million per acre. If they're in gear, it's significantly less. We've sort of been through this. So the question is, could you get enough? But it would certainly be
Not a
worth.
large number that we're looking for, so.
Right, exactly. So that's why I said I thought shellfish were a rational part of the solution, but we haven't, we're looking very deeply at some other estuaries for shellfish, and when we get to looking at this one in terms of our plan, we absolutely would look at that.
All right. Any other comment? Yes, sir. Could somebody give you a, oh, okay, maybe just come up and, okay, great. And give us your name.
Sure. My name is Dan Mahoney from Santuit Road, North Falmouth. You spoke earlier about the new treatment facility at the atrium.
Yes.
And I was wondering what town agency, if any, monitors on-site treatment facilities?
I think we have an excellent person to answer that question in George Hoyfelter from the Barnstable County Health Department.
For treatment systems above 10,000 gallons, they're under groundwater discharge permit. They make
Yes.
all the reports to the state. For any that have less than 10,000, they report to a system that our department actually monitors. But I believe if it's atria that's above 10,000 gallons, so that's groundwater discharge permit. And DEP would have all those results. They have to meet at least 10 milligrams per liter. That's usually their discharge standard. And if they don't, they very soon receive a little notice telling them that they must meet it and a plan of how they should get back to it.
10 milligrams of nitrogen.
10 milligrams per liter of nitrogen, yes.
Okay, I thank you. Perhaps we could chat afterwards. Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome, Dan. Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other questions on this? All right, as we've done in the past, Sia will write up a summary of the comments that have been made here and the recommendations for where we think further study should be done. Ultimately, we will have a report on each of all of the 15 estuaries in the town and where we think the town should go. All right, I'm going to move on to reports of members and staff. Do we have any reports?
I have a really quick one.
Okay, Sia.
On February 11th, a gentleman, John Kumbler, is going to be speaking at Cape Cod Academy. He wrote a book called Cape Cod, An Environmental History of a Fragile Ecosystem. So February 11th, he's going to be talking about his book. And I think for those of us who are involved in estuaries restoration, it will be a very interesting and informative session. So I just wanted to make the committee and our nationwide viewing audience aware that he's coming to Cape Cod Academy, February 11th, 6:30 to 8:30 p.m.
6:30 p.m. Okay, thank you, Sia.
Yeah,
Ron?
you had a couple things. One is, in Oak Bluffs, they're beginning to do work on putting in a PRB, a reactive barrier, somewhere around a lagoon pond.
Okay, Lagoon Pond.
So that's just something, so we're aware of that.
Do you know who's installing it?
Well, I think it's in the process of being designed, but P.L. Lombardo's involved.
Okay, very good. Any other reports?
One more.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, it's okay. Sorry, a little bit of
Yeah.
Following last week's meeting, about Bourne Pond and shellfish aquaculture, we had a deadline on Friday to get warrant articles in to the spring town meeting warrant.
Okay.
And so I basically put together a warrant article quickly, just as a placeholder, more or less, in case after last week's discussion, we had talked about the possibility of moving forward, or how we would do it, or whatever would happen. So I just wanted to get something on the warrant in case something could be developed that would be able to move that forward. So it's just an advisement to the Board of Selectmen to consider, supporting that activity. But it's again, it can be amended. It basically says
Placeholder.
to create a placeholder. Yeah.
Okay.
So.
Okay.
So it's-
All right, our next meeting is in 2 weeks, beginning of February, February 4th. We don't have any minutes for this meeting due to other, we just don't, so we'll be doing the minutes at the next meeting. Handed out to everybody is the notice of project change for Bourne's Pond that was reviewed and voted at the last meeting. It will be on the selectmen's agenda for Monday night to vote to submit to MEPA. And if there's nothing else, then I'll have a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Madam Chair.
All right.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Thank you for coming.